Talking with Jerry.
Well, we've got an exciting show tonight. We're going to talk about the motherland. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and you're going to really find these three short stories very interesting.
So, Jerry, I recently returned from South Africa. It was the second country that I visited on the continent, and when I say its title, the motherland, is truly deserving. My visit once again was life-giving, and so many more countries to visit it. I guess that's 54 countries, and I visited two, so I have 52 more to go.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that you have visited many African countries, and I just want to hear some of the places you've been and the stories that you can share in terms of your experiences.
Sure. So I have three short stories. These are very light in how they develop, and they're almost comical. Two out of the three. One is very serious. The visit to the slave castle. So first I wanted to mention I was invited by the president of Ghana at the time. He's now deceased, Flight General Jerry Rawlings. We share the same first name. Shared the same first name, along with a delegation of doctors and a medical team from Howard University to visit Ghana, which is on the Gold Coast of Africa. And the first story I want to tell was after being there for a few days, we got a chance to go on the president's boat with a guide and some other people up the Volta River, which is one of the largest rivers in Ghana. And it's a 2-hour boat trip to where this river ends. And this is like what you see out of the movies. It's beyond civilization. And when you get to the end of this river, there's nothing there. So we're on this boat, and, it takes, like I said, a little bit over 2 hours to get to this destination. And when we get there, the boat stops, and we get out on one side of the boat, and music starts playing. So we're like, okay, why are they playing music, from the boat? So we start to disembark, and all of a sudden we see people coming out of this clearing. I don't want to say it was a jungle. It was like woods, but a jungle. And there's a path. So they start coming, and they're very excited, mostly young people. And we are waving to them. We had an interpreter. So we have to form a single line because this path, which is like a road, but it's a path, is narrow enough that only maybe two people could walk. So I'm close to the end of the people in our group, and I'm with a Ghanaian doctor. So he spoke a little of this particular native language. A lot of people don't realize, but in Africa, even within a country, like I think Mozambique might have 63 languages. So it's hard to find somebody that knows bits and pieces of every language, especially if you go to a remote area. So we're walking, and he and I are near the end of the trail of people. I think there was maybe one group of 2 or 3 people behind us. So after walking for like 20 minutes, and it's hot, and there's a lot of foliage on each side, and I don't know what it was that made me ask him this question, but I said, because he's a Ghanaian doctor, but I called him Doc, because we had been talking as we were walking. I said, you know what, I just realized something. nobody that's with us has a weapon, you know. So he said, weapon? I said, yeah, like a gun or a stick. I mean, you know, if an animal jumps out of out of the bush, or, what are we supposed to do? He said, oh, no, we don't have, in Ghana, we don't have wild animals like that. And in this area, there's nothing to really be concerned about too much. So I said, okay, too much? What do you mean? So he said, the only thing is like the monkeys. So I said, oh, you mean like the monkeys I saw the people in the city? Because in Ghana, a lot of people have monkeys as pets. And they'll have a monkey on their shoulder. And not a big monkey, very small monkeys. So I said, oh, yeah, I saw the people in the city and the crowd. They have, a lot of people have the monkeys on their shoulder, pets. He said, oh, no, not that kind. I said, well, what kind of monkey you mean? Like, so now I'm thinking chimpanzee, right? Which is, a chimp. It's maybe 3-4 feet. So I said, oh, you mean I'd show him the height? He probably didn't know what I meant by chimpanzee. He said, no, the big one. So I said, what big one? He said, you call them apes, like real big, and they go into the village and they kidnap people, they take the babies off, they're big, they attack you. So I'm like, wait a minute, they're all in this area. And he said, yeah, the big ones, but we're all together, we're making noise, they won't come. I started to walk so fast to catch up to everybody else.
Yeah.
Because I said, this is all I need to come all the way across the ocean to be attacked by an ape, that comes out of the woods. And nobody has anything to get this gorilla, I shouldn't have said ape, this gorilla off of me. So anyway, we get to this remote village, and it is a village. There people are living in huts. There's a chief. And I sit down and I'm observing, and the doctors start to do their thing. They're asking through the interpreter, well, what do the people do if they have a headache? And these young boys would run into the woods or wherever, and they come back with a piece of bark, or they come back with a leaf or twigs, and they would explain how they would boil something and drink it, and it got rid of a headache. Well, what do you do if you have, stomach cramps? What do you do if somebody has they didn't know arthritis, but a form of, rheumatism and pain in their back or their arm? And they showed how they made ointments, and this was very intriguing. And, these are how these people have lived for hundreds of years. So, time is going on. And as I said, the doctors are doing their thing, the medical team. And as time goes on, it's starting to get dark. So I'm getting a little hesitant, because I'm thinking about, we got to make like almost a half-hour walk back to the boat. And if it's dark, and here's the other thing, nobody has a flashlight, right? And in this village, when it gets dark, it's dark. Like, there's no lights there. It's the village. Mm-hmm. So I, start to mention to somebody, hey, it's starting to get dark soon, boom, boom, boom. So the doctors, they just really want to do their thing. So they're, talking to everybody separately. So now they're going to leave the people in the village with medicine, like aspirins, things for pain, alcohol, and all this. And they start to line up the women. And all of a sudden, there's all this commotion. So I'm looking what's going on, interpreters, what's going on. So they go and stop the doctors, and they say, listen, we can't do this like this. So they don't understand. And they explain to them that the chief goes first, along with other male elders, and then the warriors go, and then down to the youngest boys. Then the women get, if they're going to lead them something. So the two of the female doctors are like, no, I'm not participating in this. That's chauvinism. So it took about 15 minutes to calm everybody down and say, listen, this is how these people have lived for hundreds of years. We're not going to change it, and we're insulting them. So reluctantly, the women doctors agreed, and we had to take care of the chief first, and then his tribal council and his elders, and then the older boys, teenage boys, and then to the youngest, and then we got to the women. Now there's a horn blowing, and I know there's no cars there, and that's the captain of the boat saying, where you guys at? Like, we got to leave,
Right.
So I'm going up to this doctor that I befriended when I was there, and I said, I think we got to speed it up, because, they're blowing the horn for the boat for us, like, where we at? Mm-hmm. So we're getting everything together, and now the chief comes over, and he's crying, and he's thanking us in his language. We don't know what he's saying, and he gives us this goat. So once again, the women are
Goat?
going, what is this goat? We can't take this. So they don't know whether we're supposed to sacrifice the goat or so the interpreter says, no, we have to take this goat with us. So we have no room for a goat. What are we going to do with a goat? So that, well, you're going to insult them if you don't take this goat. So we just have to take the goat with them. So you know what's on my mind, right?
What?
As we're walking back to the boat, and then now it's dark, and there's this little path that a gorilla is going to attack us for the goat.
For the goat.
Right. So I don't want to be nowhere near that goat. And I don't know whether to be first in the line to start walking or in the middle,
Uh-huh.
So we ended up, getting back to the boat safely. And some of them followed us to the shore, and it was just a nice experience. But that story, that experience of knowing that we could be attacked by gorillas, and nobody had anything other than just for us to run, I said to myself, did I come all the way here to have something like this happen to me?
Exactly.
Exactly. So,
Exactly.
yeah. So now my most I would say emotional experience, and one as to why I went on this trip, was to visit the slave castles.
Oh, exactly.
Yeah.
Point of no return. And actually, Ghana is my next trip. It's on my radar,
Mm-hmm.
and it's the next place that I plan to visit.
Yeah.
Tell me.
Yeah. Well,
How was that?
yeah.
I've heard many stories. I've seen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Um,
Well, it is
yeah.
just like what you see, and the good thing about Ghana is people speak English. Your American dollar goes far. The people are so welcoming. They don't have any like coups and any uprisings, because they really don't have a lot of resources. Much of their resources, gold was stolen during the pre-colonial period, and so other than some companies that go there to do some light mining for minerals and so forth, there's just no issues there. It's just a beautiful country. So in this particular trip, we go to the slave castles. But what happened on my journey to Egypt, Nigeria, and now I'm in Ghana, I had been just drinking water, no beverages, and not eating any meat, because you have to be careful, as you know, of the food. And I didn't want to get sick. But we're in the restaurant the night before. We're going to the slave castles, and I just had a taste for some meat. And they had some steak. And I said, well, you know what? I'm in the restaurant. I'll just take a little piece of steak. I ate it. And that night I went to sleep, and something woke me up about 2, 3 in the morning, and my stomach was just killing me, and I was sick all night, in the bathroom. And now I finally go back to sleep, and it's banging on my door, and it's the people I'm with, and they were like, where you at? You're supposed to be downstairs. We're getting ready to leave. And I look, and I'm soaking wet, and I'm still feeling sick. But I had traveled all this way to Ghana, to Africa, to visit the slave castles. So I said, give me 10 minutes. I jumped in a cold shower, and I ran downstairs to get in the car. And my stomach was still a little uneasy. And the unfortunate part is, once you get outside of Accra, the roads are not too well paved. So it was a lot of bumps and so forth. But we get to the first slave castle, which is Elmina Slave Castle, which was a Dutch, and then the English took it over. And for 300 years, slaves were captured from the interior of Africa, brought to Elmina Castle, and then shipped out to the Caribbean and to the United States, which was then the New World, or the colonies for Europe. And there's a guide there to explain to you what the setup of the slave castle was like. And it was just a moving experience, visiting the holding area where they kept the slaves, the males in one dungeon, the females in another. When they would feed them, they would just throw food through a hole in the wall for people to eat. And they told these various stories about how the Ashanti tribe chased the Dutch out of that castle and fought for years to destroy the slave trade. But eventually the Dutch left, but then the British came. And they were persistent with cannons and everything, but the Ashanti people kept fighting as best they could. Then there's something, as you mentioned, called the Door of No Return.
Yeah.
And it is the most eerie feeling. It's inside of the castle, and they would bring the men out and the women in a line. They hadn't seen each other since they had been captured, maybe days, weeks, months. And they march you through this door. It's like an opening in this castle that leads to the sea. And because this castle was built right on the ocean. And you hear the roar of the ocean. You hear the waves. And the guide is explaining to you that these slaves were walking through the door of no return, not knowing where they were going, seeing a ship that they would soon board and be chained, and they would never see Africa again. And that's why it's called the Door of No Return. And the way he explained it was so emotional that when we got up to the top of the fort and looked out on the Atlantic Ocean, I mean, for me to say grown men and women got on their knees and were crying and weeping, it was like, being at the gravesite and someone's about to be put in the ground that you've loved your whole life, and you prayed for your ancestors. But, as the guide explained, we have come home now. We are the descendants of the survivors, those who withstood the journey,
Yeah.
and then whose ancestors were able to live long enough in slavery to give birth to us. So don't feel bad and welcome home. So it was just such an emotional experience. As I said, with these doctors and so forth, who I don't think that morning they thought that they would have the emotional roller coaster that they had. So that's another short story with the emotional trip on this visit back to the motherland, which was my first to Ghana. And then the last one I want to end is somewhat of a funny story. So near the last few days of my trip in Ghana, I was in Ghana, I think it was for 10 days. And in the hotel we were at, there was a young man. He had been, in the lobby and just hanging around. So this one day he comes over, he starts talking to me and one of the gentlemen that I was there with. And we're just talking about America. And at the time I was living in Atlanta, and he's asking me about Atlanta. So he says, well, how many days have you been here? And you should really just do something else other than the cultural experience and go to a club or nightclub. And I said, well, I'm not really here for that. I'm here with these doctors, and we're doing a lot of good work. Because we did some work with some Ghanaian doctors in the city. And as I said, we brought a lot of medical supplies with us. And I told him we were doing the cultural thing and some shopping.
Do any nightlife?
Yeah, but I wasn't there for no nightlife. So he says, listen, you've been here all those days, and then you were in Nigeria, and then you were in Egypt. I need to show you some women here in the country. These women are beautiful, and come to the club. And I said, no, I'm not going out to any club. And he says to me, well, when celebrities come, I always take them around and I show them all of the beautiful women here. And I guess for one of the biggest celebrities he could think of, he says Stevie Wonder.
Uh-huh.
So me and my friend, we started laughing. And then, yeah, he's moved to Africa. I'm sure to Accra in Ghana. I'm sure he goes back and
Somewhere in
forth.
that, yeah.
Right. But me and my friend, we looked at each other and we go, wait a minute. He's trying to impress us, to tell us to come to this club to show us all these beautiful women. But he tells us that he took Stevie Wonder there, but Stevie can't see. So, like, how are you impressing us? And he's he's an African brother with a strong accent, and we didn't want to laugh too much. So he's not getting anywhere with us. And then finally, I guess he had to come up with something else. And he says, look, man, some of the girls that are here in Ghana, you'd be surprised. They're queens. They look like they're from Queens. So he didn't know that I grew up in New York. And at first I think he meant like a queen. And then he said, no, they look like queens. So I said, Queens, New York? He said, yeah, like Eddie Murphy. You know the movie Coming to America? Because when he went to America, he went to Queens because that's where all the beautiful women were. And me and my friend looked at each other and we were like, oh, this is just too much. This brother is trying to get us to go to this club.
Yes.
And he's telling us that the girls look as beautiful as women in Queens because what he relates to is Eddie Murphy in Coming to America. When he was looking for a beautiful woman, he went to Queens, New York.
Went to Queens.
You know, so
And you know that is too funny. But
So-
actually, a whole nother topic
Uh-huh.
in terms of you know what they know, but what each of those countries learn
yeah, and but
about America. So
True.
That's a whole nother
yeah, because they are
story
they
there. But that is too funny that he was making his sale though. He was
He-
making that case.
he was
And
making
I
his
love
sale.
it.
I don't know whether or not when we got to the club, what we paid to go in, they gave him, like a couple of dollars for every American or tourist that he brought to this club.
Mm-hmm.
It must have been something because he was trying every sales pitch that he could. But as
love
I
it.
said, we weren't interested in going to a club over in Ghana. We were there for other reasons. But it was a great trip. I would encourage anyone. Africa is, a huge continent with just loving people, gracious people. And Ghana is one of the best because most of them speak English in Accra and in all of the major cities. And as a tourist, you will love it. It's affordable. And for ADOS, American Descendants of Slaves, they will say to you, brother, welcome home. Sister,
Yes,
sister, welcome
I
home.
experienced that in South Africa, and it is an unbelievable feeling. Just
Yes.
To, for someone to say that to you, and then you see home there through the people.
Yes, you see it through the people. So I just want to mention that within the next week, I'm going to be doing a historical podcast about what is probably the richest country on the face of the earth in the Central Republic of Africa, also called the Congo, also called Zaire many years ago. Why it is perhaps the richest country on earth, but yet its people are the poorest. Why are they the poorest? What role did the United States government through the CIA do in terms of actually having a role in killing several of their presidents elected by the people and then installing a dictator? And you'd be surprised that even at one point, the head of the United Nations, who was going to that country on a peace mission, his plane didn't crash, it was shot down. Shot down by who? Well, you'll find out in the next podcast about the motherland, Africa, a more serious take. Don't forget, subscribe, like, see you soon.